Thanks for joining me on episode 4 of R2P Origins. This episode, I'm going to dive into my first experiences on business. I didn't have a business degree like many people who will get into running a business. I was really good at service, and by service, I mean lacrosse, because the first business that I actually ended up running, I started in 2011. It was right after graduate school, and for those of you who are familiar with it or unfamiliar with it, it was called Lax Factory. But this company was rooted in my passion growing up, which was the sport of lacrosse. I did camps and clinics ever since I was in college. I would do clinics on my breaks, summer break, winter break. I would do private lessons. I at some point ran a camp that was 80 plus kids one summer. And that was where I finally went, you know what? Maybe this is something that I could turn into a business as I go through my time as a physical therapist. But what actually was a very pivotal point for me is I was in graduate school. I not only was doing camps and clinics, but I was also playing professional lacrosse, and I did those for my first 2 years of graduate school. I would either leave Thursday night and tisk, not go to class on Friday, or on Friday I would fly out, and for anybody who's familiar with that, you would usually practice the night before and play a game or potentially have a game practice game on a longer weekend when it came to the league that I was playing in. But there was actually a conversation that I had second year of DPT school where I asked my mom, hey mom, do you think I could quit PT school and potentially run a lacrosse services company? I could do camps, clinics, I could run a bunch of club teams, I could do tournaments and play professional lacrosse. And while I love lacrosse, thankfully my mom said, hey Josh, like you're almost to the point where you're earning your clinical doctorate. You can do all these lacrosse things and still be a physical therapist. So thank you, Mom. Really appreciate that. But nonetheless, I started Lax Factory in 2011, and it was an opportunity for me from a side hustle standpoint to learn the ins and outs of business, learn on the fly, obviously still having a day job during my time working for a local private practice. But it really was able to put me in a situation where I was doing an on-the-fly MBA, so to speak. I'm learning all the little things associated with finances, right? Accounting, things like marketing, some of the administrative, more clerical-oriented tasks outside of just delivering the service, which for this was teaching the sport of lacrosse. But another thing that I also learned in this environment was developing what I'll call now social capital. I always knew that intellectual capital was something that was going to be important to me eventually opening up a physical therapy company. I knew that financial capital, right, just having finances, having awareness of the expenses and being able to build out forecasting and certain things associated with starting up this company, but eventually putting myself in a situation where, as a result of the connectivity I was having through lacrosse, I realized that there was something extremely beneficial that also needed to be had outside of me just being good at PT and having an awareness of how the financial side worked in terms of running a business. So the social capital, that connectivity piece, me being involved in the community, knowing a lot of the stakeholders, being able to reach out to people and ideally expand and maybe search their network a little bit. But that was also a time where I realized that it wasn't necessarily about who you knew, but it was about who knew you. When it came to lacrosse services and being able to provide a service that was differentiated, it was, okay, this person offers this, but how good are they at this? How do they do things differently? What problems are they really solving that somebody else didn't solve? So there were certain things that I think really prepared me for my experience, I should say prepared me for eventually cutting the cord and ending up doing Rehab2Perform. So I am very, very grateful for the opportunity to have a small business before Rehab2Perform, learn the ins and outs of just how things are working. Fortunately, both through my day job, playing professional lacrosse, having multitude of different jobs going through school, and Lax Factor, I was also able to pay my loans off at a certain time period. That was a big check mark for me. I paid my loans off, and I got to a certain point where eventually I was able to open up Rehab2Perform as a result of various side jobs, but particularly having that side hustle that was putting my passion into something which I enjoyed, which was the first and foremost reason that I did it. Putting myself in an environment where I can learn the ins and outs of running a service-based business, and then ideally putting myself in a situation where I'm continuing to hone the intellectual capital, which for Rehab2Perform was my ability to be a higher level PT, right? Pouring into myself to improve the ability to deliver the service. Improving my financial capital, paying off loans, right? Making sure that I didn't have as much personal expenses that I had to account for when I finally, cut the cord from the 9 to 5. And then developing social capital, which is really just connectivity, learning people, learning the connectivity of the community, eventually getting to a point where I understood a marketing plan, an exposure plan, so to speak, in terms of how to get out in front of people and ideally deliver value and not always necessarily ask for it. But all of these different things that went through those formative years, college, graduate school, and then that 3-year period after PT school where I went all in on Lax Factory was critical to me hitting the ground running. I finally cut the cord. I got to a point in time where I felt very, very comfortable, and Lax Factory kept running as Rehab2Perform started in December of 2014. And I actually ran Rehab2Perform and Lax Factory. They were both growing, and then I just got to a point where it made sense for me to transition Lax Factory. To be quite honest, I was just no longer able to maintain things in a certain manner in two different worlds that I was comfortable with, and transition that in 2018. And I think really these past 2, maybe almost 3 years have been extremely, extremely different as a result of me being able to, instead of being a mile wide, go a mile deep into Rehab2Perform. But I appreciate you tuning in again for episode 4. The side hustle, so to speak, and then my learning process for my first company, which was not Rehab2Perform. Stay tuned for the next episode, which will actually get a little bit into that early stage as I'm looking to finally cut the cord, some of the decision-making processes, some of the people that were involved in what was going on, and then that moment where I finally said, I'm in, and signed the lease. Stay tuned.